Oh hi. Thebes, the city in Greece, on the place of the ancient city of the same name. It is located at the height of 180 meters above sea level, in 41 kilometers to the east from Levadia and in 52 kilometers to the northwest from Athens. The administrative center of the community of the same name. Lama. In peripheral unit of Boeotia in the periphery of the central Greece. The population 22883 inhabitants on a census of 2011, is the largest city in Boeotia and the third largest city in the periphery after Lamia and Halkida. Area 143.889 square kilometers. Through the city the National Road 3 runs. Levadia Elefsis. National Road 44 connects the city with Halkida. To the north from the city there passes the Highway 1 Piraeus, Athens, Thessaloniki, Avzoni, a part of European route. Railway station, Thebes. Serves the Piraeus-Thessaloniki line. Ancient Thebes was the capital of Boeotia and was located on quite considerable height among the fertile plain Onion. Cadme based according to the legend Cadmon, the son of the Phoenicians are 3.5 thousand years ago and called originally. In historiographic sketches Thebes is known as one of the most powerful polities in the history of ancient Greece. The city had round shape and was surrounded with a wall with 7 gates because of what the city often was called Thebes Semivretnimi. To distinguish from the Egyptian city of the same name, Stavratni Thebes. The city was surrounded with a wall with 7 gates. Near Thebes the stream sung by Virgil proceeded. Probably his waters were involved instead of a ditch. In the south the wall coincided with a wall of the Thebes Acropolis of Cadme. Further I went in the southeast direction through a range. Further on the valley of the Isman River. To the second ridge terminating from east side in the steep. Then from an angular tower on the southeast it accepted the direction from the south on the north and crossed the road connecting Thebes to Halkida. Near the road there were Proititsky Gate. Further I turned on the northwest to the sacred site Eoleia. I crossed the Derku River. There were Krenisky Gate here. Then, it is unknown in what point. I went to the south, being interrupted in the western part by Nitsky Gate. At last I turned on the east. In a southwest corner there were, apparently, Gipsistisky Gate. And I united to the Cadmean wall near which there were Jigisky Gate. Except the mentioned 5 gate, in the southern part of a wall there were Elektrinsky Gate. Called by the name of Cad's sisters, Electra. From which the road conducting to Plati, location of Komoloisky Gate began. Remains to unknown. Near Proititsky Gate there was a theatre and the area near Jigisky. And Athena Unka's altar. Plentiful irrigation promoted growth of meadow greens. Thebes was famous for the culture of horses and garden trees. The main small rivers of the city were Isman and his inflow of Dirk. Ismena waters within the city gathered in the special pool, a so-called source of ours. Besides the Edpa source and a water supply system bringing water in Cadme from sources on Kitarona was known. In the downtown, on the small hill, I towered Cadme, the Thebes Acropolis. Near Elektrinsky Gate on the hill there was Apollon Ismenias temple, decorated in the ancient time with Phidias and Scopas' sculptural works. In several versts from Thebes, to the south from the road conducting to Thespium in 1887 the ancient sanctuary of Kabir was open. Thebes is located on the plain between the Lake Aliki in the north and mountains Kitaran which separate Boeotia from Attica in the south. The city is at the height of 215 meters above sea level. The city is approximately in 50 kilometers to the northwest from Athens and in 100 kilometers to the southeast from Lamia. The Highway 1 and the railroad Athens-Thessaloniki connect Thebes to Athens and northern Greece. In 2011, as a result of Kallikratis' reform, Thebes was combined with Platiami, Tisvi and Vijaya to create larger municipality which kept the name Thebes. Other three steals in units of larger municipality. The history of Thebes as most ancient city of Hellas goes back to the heroic period. Thebes is adjoined by a number of the legends narrating about Cadme. Founder Cadme. On Zeta and Amphiona. The founder of Thebes. About Dionysus, about Heracles, about Labdacidoc and Oedipus, about a campaign of 7 Tsars of the minding Thebes. About a campaign of imitators, the legends which are ranking high in a treasury of ancient Greek epic material. Though in stratifications of these legends a lot of things are purely poetic fiction, however, there is an opportunity to find in some historical memoirs. So, in the legend on a campaign of 7 memories of Sicyoans' fight and Argos with Thebes, in legends on Heracles, memories of prehistoric fight of 2 competing cities of Boeotia, Thebes and Orchum and Meniskea are reflected. History of the first days of existence of Thebes remained at Greeks in the plentiful Massachusetts of the legends competing to myths about Troy, the wide circulation and impact which they had on literature of a classical era. It is possible to allocate 5 basis cycles of the narration. The basis Cadmum of Cadme's citadel and growth, from the teeth of the dragon killed by Cadme seeded to the earth, soldiers of the Sparta. Seeded. Probably, the Ethiologiceski myth designed to explain origin of the Thebes nobility bearing this name in historical times. Semele's sacrifice and Dionysus' coming. Construction of a wall by Amphion with 7 gate and Zet, Antiope and Dirk's related stories. The history of Bark, whose crimes came to the end with the tragedy by Oedipus and wars of 7 mines Thebes and imitators and falling of his house. Pederastic rape by lie of Ricip was considered as some ancient as the first case of homosexuality among mortal and, probably, served as an etiology for practice of a pedagogical pederasty for which ancient Thebes was famous. The labours of Hercules. Greeks attributed the basis of Thebes to Cadme, the Phoenician Tsarevich from the shooting gallery and to the brother of Europe. Cadme became famous for the fact that taught the Phoenician alphabet and constructed an acropolis which was called Cadme in his honor and was the intellectual, spiritual and cultural center of the city. Despite certificates of antiquity on Phoenician origin of Cadme and for the remains of Semiticheski culture because of Thebes. A sanctuary of Kabir. It is hardly possible on the basis of these data to recognize Phoenician colonization of Boeotia, the area remote from the sea. The emergence of a name of Cadme and Cadmans is unknown, however to doubt purely Greek origin of Thebes there are no bases. Residents of Thebes are related with Abant, Giant, Miniets, Ona, Temica and belong to the northeast group of the Greek tribe which moved in prehistoric time from Thessaly. Asian elements of the Thebes legends perhaps were introduced by Ionians who, if didn't create, then developed material of these legends in Asia Minor. As they strengthened community, it drew attention of the intruded Doriettes, and the fact of final gain by them of Thebes is the cornerstone of stories about consecutive legendary attacks on this city. The central position and military safety of the city, naturally, promoted that it held a dominant position among Boeotians, and from the first days its inhabitants sought to establish empery over the relatives in the remote cities. This policy of centralization is so cardinal fact of the Thebes history. The efforts of the small cities as counteracting to resist to absorption make the main chapter of history of Boeotia. No details of earlier history of Thebes remained except that it was operated by the landowners' aristocracy which protected the integrity tough laws on possession of property and its transfer eventually. As it was already attested in the Iliad by Homer, Thebes was often called by Semivratni Thebes. The Iliad 406. To distinguish them from Stavratni Thebes. In Egypt. The Iliad 383. In the history of the Boeotia cities of Thebes played a prevailing role, and already during a prehistoric era. Fight against Orchomen. His aspiration to hegemony over the neighboring cities is noticeable. In the 6th century BB Thebes had political prevalence in the Boeotia Union. The city of Tanagra, Thespia, Coroni and others were obliged to give them the famous contingent of army. The initial monarchic board was replaced eventually with aristocratic. Rich landowners of notable surnames were dicks of the ruling estate. I was the place of meetings of the Thebes Government Council Cadme. This council had the prevailing value in affairs of the Boeotia Union. Thebans jealously and persistently supported the hegemony, and many wars which they had to conduct were directed against the states counteracting their sheep policy. So in 507 BB Thebes were at war with Athens because of the city of Plataea, which Athenians promised the help to the minding burdensome hegemony of the Thebes aristocracy. At Plataea Thebanets were broken, then they concluded the alliance with aristocratic Sparta. Vision to secure bandits of Persians hegemony over Prespilium blood Yomit, two rebellious cities which took the side of Athens, refused to take part in the allied council of the Hellenic cities which gathered for discussion of measures of resistance to the approaching enemy and expressed to the Persian ambassador humility, though in 480 BB they also sent 400 doublet to their nobility. After fight at Plataea, 479 BB. The Greek army approached Thebes, demanding delivery of aristocrats, representatives of the Persian party. As it to Paphsani it was refused, he besieged the city and forced Thebanets to give guilty persons who were executed. Victorious Greeks punished Thebes subsequently, having deprived of them presidency in the Boeotia Union, and the attempt of Spartans to expel them from the Delphic Amphictynia wasn't successful, only protection of Athens. In 457 BB Sparta, needing a counterbalance to Athens in the central Greece, I changed the policy and I restored Thebes as the dominating power in Boeotia. About 460 BB Spartans returned to Thebes. The hegemony over the Boeotia cities lost after Plataea fight.
Walls of Thebes were restored and the former power as a stronghold was provided to Fivenet's mind's distribution of the Athenian hegemony in central Greece.
Chemmi's citadel well served this purpose, keeping as base of resistance when Athenians took and occupied the rest of the region. 447 years BB. In the Peloponnese War, the Fivenets embittered by support which Athens gave to smaller Boeotia cities and especially Plataea, which they vainly tried to reduce in 431 BB, were firm allies of Sparta, which, in turn, helped them to besiege Plataea and allowed them to destroy the city after his capture in 427 BB. In 424 BC,
at the head of the Boeotia Union, they inflicted severe defeat over the intruded forces of Athenians in fight at Delia and for the first time showed influence of that firm military organization which finally lifted them to domination in Greece.
In fight of Corinth against Corfu, 435 BB. Fivenets helped Corinthians with equipment of their expedition. Further, the course of the Peloponnese War supported to Nikiev of the world of Spartans, but as Spartans refused to strengthen, in remuneration for the support given them, full hegemony of Thebes over all Boeotia, between both Union states there was a gap.
Due to the political growth of the Mendon of Boeotia and moderate and democratic board which representatives steadily went towards one aim, consolidation of hegemony of Thebes ennobled the city by the beginning of the 4th century BB almost to level with Athens and Sparta and led at last to temporary hegemony not only over Boeotia, but also of Greece.
After falling of Athens at the end of the Peloponnese War, Fivenets, having learned that Sparta intends to protect city-states which Thebes wanted to annex, broke off with her the union. In 404 BC, they called for elimination of Athens. However, in 403 BC, they secretly supported restoration of democracy in Athens to find in it a counterbalance to Sparta. Several years later, probably, partly under the influence of the Persian gold, they created a kernel of the Union mind Sparta. In 395 BB, Thebes formed League of the Asian cities against Sparta and concluded the alliance with Athenians. Same year they broke Lysander at Galiart. In 394 the new union against Sparta was formed BB, but at Corinth the allied army was broken, and soon Fivenets lost fight at Coronea. And Talcada of the world. 387 BB. Deprived Thebes' hegemonies over the Boeotia cities, Spartans took measures to aid protection of independence of the cities of Orchomena and Thespi hostile to Thebes, having put the garrisons in these cities. Soon, however, Boeotians came to the decision to be exempted from Spartan oppression by restoration of the Union. In 383 BB the Spartan commander Phoebid, on the way to Hypkidica, captured Thebes to suppress the party wishing to shake Spartan guardianship.
Spartans approved the oligarchical board which is again entered by the supporter of Sparta Leontiad, which representatives announced terror of the minding supporters of Democratic Party. Ismene, who sought to restore the Boeotia Union under hegemony of Thebes, was executed.
Many were killed, many, escaping from terror, ran to Athens. The Thebes emigration and further cruelty of oligarchs awakened a patriotic heat in the Thebes youth. United by two outstanding Fivenets, friends Pelopid and Epaminondas, representatives of the national party rose and, having shaken a yoke of Sparta, claimed, though for a short time, hegemony of the hometown. In the followed wars with Sparta, the Thebes army trained and headed by Epaminondas and Pelopid proved to be terrible force. Years of chaotic battles during which Thebes established the control over all Boeotia came to the end in 371 BC, with a victory over Spartans in the Battle of Leuctra. They entered Peloponnese at the head of Grand Coalition and forever undermined power of Sparta, having partially released many slaves making fundamentals of Spartan economy. Similar expeditions were sent to Thessaly and Macedonia for settlement of affairs in these regions. However, domination of Thebes was short, as policies which Thebes protected refused to submit to her control. Thebes resumed rivalry with Athens, which joined them in 395 BC. In fear of Sparta, but since 387 BC, tried to keep balance of forces of the minding ally, having prevented formation of the Thebes Empire. With Epaminondas' death in the Battle of Mantinea, 362 BB, the policy fell to position of the minor power again. The local patriotic purposes and means which were applied to their achievement didn't provide to Thebes of strong well-being, and further at progress of the increasing power of Macedonia, the policy was forced to obey to it. The Third Holy War, 356-346 years BB, which began between Phociates and Fivenettes, was of Philip's intervention in affairs of central Greece the cause. The last, together with citizens of Thessalia, were at the head of the Union of the Amphictyon, which declared to Phociates war. The war also gave to Thebes prevalence over all Boeotia, but political circumstances which became complicated soon led to education against Philip of the Boeotia and Athenian Union, which actions were allowed by Philip's victory at Herone. 338 BB. Settlement in Cadme of the Macedonian garrison and disintegration of the Boeotia Union. Philip was happy that he deprived Thebes their dominions over Boeotia. In 335 BB, Thebes, under the influence of false rumors about Alexander of Macedon's death, rose against the Macedonian dominion. Alexander, having been with army and by means of the Greek allies, the city stormed, and 6,000 people were killed on city streets and 30,000 were taken prisoner and sold in slavery. The city was destroyed except for the fortress of Cadme, where the Macedonian garrison and houses of the poet Pindar was left. Alexander spared only priests, leaders of the pro-Macedonian party and Pindar's descendants. The end of Thebes resulted Athens in humility. According to Plutarch, the special Athenian embassy led by Phocion, the opponent of the anti-Macedonian faction, could convince Alexander to abandon the claims about exile of leaders of the anti-Macedonian party, and in particular Demosthenes, and not to sell the people in slavery. Ancient writing is inclined to treat destruction Alexander concerning Thebes as excessive. Plutarch, however, writes that Alexander grieved later because of the fervor, answering Fivenettes any request for favor and advising to pay attention to invasion into Asia, and that if he fails, Thebes can become the ruling city-state again. Though Thebes was traditionally antagonistic to any policy heading the Greek world, having supported Persians when they intruded against the Atheno-Spartan Union, having supported Sparta when Athens seemed all-powerful, and dashingly having broken Spartan invasion of Agesilaia into Persia. The father Alexander Philip grew up in Thebes, though as the hostage, and learned much at Peloponnese in military art. Philip was honored by this fact, always aspiring to the union with Boeotians, even in anticipation of war with them. Thebes was also esteemed as the most ancient of the Greek cities, which history contains more 1,000. Plutarch writes that during the later gains, every time when Alexander faced the former Fivenettes, he tried to compensate the destruction of Thebes by favor to this person. After Alexander of Macedon's death in 323 BC, Thebes was restored in 315 BC by Alexander's successor in Macedonia, Cassander. Restoring Thebes, Cassander sought to correct the mistakes made by Alexander, gesture of generosity which brought Cassander big goodwill on all Greece.
In addition to the fact that Cassander's sweet-hearted Athenians and many Peloponnese policies, restoration of Thebes gave him faithful allies in the person of the Thebes exiles who returned again to occupy the city. The plan Cassandra on restoration of Thebes demanded from various Greek policies of granting the qualified labor, and eventually it was successful.
Athenians, for example, restored the most part of the Thebes walls.
Large donations were sent from the megalopolis, Mycenae, and even from Sicily and Italy.
Despite restoration, Thebes didn't find former greatness. That Cassandra in 297 BC created a vacuum of the power on the most part of the territory of Greece that partly promoted a siege of Thebes. Demetri Poliorket in 293 BC. Again after the revolt in 292 BC. This last siege was difficult, and Demetri was wounded, but eventually he managed to break walls and again to take the city, having managed with him as soft, despite his furious resistance. This city restored the autonomy from Demetri in 287 BC. And entered into alliance with Lysimac and the Aetoliski Union. In the middle of the 3rd century BB again Thebes became the head of the restored Boeotia Union, but decline of customs and impoverishment of public, intellectual and creative work characterized the further period of existence of the Union. In 146 BB Thebes obeyed Romans, and for participation in a national revolt the city was subjected to severe punishment. In the 87th year BB during Sulla's fight against Mithridat, Thebes joined allied army of the last, but after fight at Orchomen. The 85th year BB, where Sulla won a victory, incurred severe punishment for commitment to freedom again. From now on Thebes from the considerable city addressed to the insignificant settlement. At the time of Strabo in Thebes remained only one Cadme in which there lived several families. In the 2nd century at Pavsini found lived only 2 Cadme. Decrease in the population and impoverishment of the city also completed invasions of Geril and Isredi in the 3rd and 4th centuries. The Christianity in Boeotia appeared in the 1st century AD. Fivanets were attached to Christianity, apostles Luca and Ruf. Ruf became the first bishop of Thebes and stayed him about 54/68 years.
In the early Middle Ages the city served as a shelter from overseas aggressors. In the same time the city was the headquarters of the military commandant of area and also the place of stay of many other officials of the empire. The city and the region in the short-term period began to conduct various economic activity as a result of what it became from the richest cities of the empire.
The agricultural products of Boeotia went for export to many cities of the region and Europe. Since the 10th century Thebes became the center of silk trade, city silk workshops extended due to import of soap and dyes from Athens.
Growth of trade in Thebes continued to such an extent that to the middle of the 12th century the city became the largest producer of silk in all Eastern Roman Empire, having surpassed even the capital of the empire, Constantinople.
The Thebes women were famous for the skill of weaving. During this period the Thebes silk was appreciated above all others, both its quality and excellent reputation. According to the Italian medieval chronicler of the 12th century, 200 Jews who were engaged in treatment, weaving and coloring of silk lived in Thebes. Medieval Thebes was learnings and educations, in the city was many scientists and other various intellectuals.
Though Thebes was cruelly plundered by Normans in 1146, and before Bulgarians in 1040, they quickly restored the prosperity and continued to grow quickly up to gaining the city of Alatinianama during the Fourth Crusade in 1204.
After conquest of Constantinople by Crusaders in 1204 they for a short time got under the power of the Peloponnese Arch in Levsko, then were a part of the Athenian Duchy. Thanks to the wealth the city was chosen as a Franksky dynasty de la Roche as the capital before the capital from Athens forever was transferred. After 1240 the family of Saint Omer controlled the city together with Dukes de la Roche. The St. Omer's lock constructed by Nicholas II on the Cadmea River was one of the most beautiful in Franksky Greece. After the gain in 1311 the city was used as the capital by the short-lived state the Catalan Company. In 1379 the Navarre Company occupied the city by means of the Latin Archbishop of Thebes Simon Atumano. Ottomans renamed Thebes in Istaf and operated them before the War of Independence of Greece. 1821, nominally till 1832. Except for the Venetian interlude between 1687 and 1699. During Ottoman domination Thebes was granted to the Sultan. That is the Sultan's mothers. Vale guaranteed to mint inhabitants what without his permission to them penalties couldn't impose or arrest. The silk industry and agriculture in the first years still blossomed so that Thebes continued to be considered as the rich city.
However, gradually thanks to actions of the Turkish officials, falling of economic prosperity of the city began.
Peasants began to leave plains and to go to the neighboring mountain country because they weren't able to pay huge taxes. Education also degraded and monasteries remained a source of training only. At the beginning of April, 1821 the city was occupied by insurgents during the War of Independence of Greece. In the same time Turks together with the families escaped to Istanbul. Insurgents occupied Hill Antiproti from where after return of the Turkish army to the city, they began to make the constant attacks till June, 1821 when Ottomans strengthened Thebes and decided to be through with insurgents.
Turks arranged raids on surrounding villages, plundering and killing locals.
On June 1, 1821 to insurgents the reinforcement and thanks to victorious fight at Piat came, all Boeotia was freed, and since 1829 became a part of the new Greek state.
Only by the beginning of the 20th century the city begins to be built up and come to life. His population reaches 5,000 people. At this time he is included into the number Boeotia of Greece, which capital they were until the end of the 19th century when Levadia became the capital of the area.
Today Thebes it is the busy trade city known for the numerous goods and services. Till 1980th years agrarian production with some industrial complexes prospered here. However in the late 80s and the 1990th years the main part of the industry moved further to the south, is closer to Athens.
Tourism in this area is based generally in Thebes and neighboring villages where there is a set of the sites connected with antiquity such as battlefield where there was a fight at Platyope. Proximity to other, better-known destinations, such as Athena and Halkida, and also undeveloped archaeological sites hold number of tourists at a low level.
Thebes is included into the Thebski and Levidiski Metropolitanate of Hellas Orthodox Church, with the center in Levadia existing since the Middle Ages. Metropolitan Thebes and Levidiski.
Before election as the archbishop in 2008, the native of Boeotia Jerome II was Athenian.
In 1910 on Hill Ismeni Apollo, which overgrew pines between the cemetery of Thebes of Ios Lucas and Elektrinsky Gate. Andonios Karamopoulos Digot, the temple devoted to Apollon Ismeni and mentioned by Paphsini. Ismeni's cult was one of the most important in Thebes, along with Demetra's Akonodatalnitsi's cult. The temple had sizes 21.6,
9.3 meters and colonnade
12.6. Probably it is constructed after the Battle of Leuctra, 371 BB. On the place of the temple of the period of dark centuries and the Archaic period. In 1963, in connection with reorganization of the modern city of Thebes, of excavation were renewed under the leadership of Nikolaos Plato, and then some other the Greek archaeologists, in particular F. Spiropoulos. On the hill in the center of a necropolis of Thebes Cadme.
According to the legend constructed by the founder of Thebes Cadme in 1964, Nikolaos Platon and Evistasinopoulou.
Digot treasury and arsenal of the Mycenaean Cadmeona Palace. The 13th century BB. About 45 clay tablets with signs of the linear letter B were found that demonstrated existence of the Thebes Palace archives, similar Pylos and Knossos.
In Thebes, 36 imported Babylon cylindrical Azeratovi seals with cuneiform inscriptions of the 14th century BB were also revealed.
As a result of excavation, fragments of frescoes, including with elegantly dressed women and grouped from more than 100 big clay-painted Stremevidi vessels, were open. Amphros brought from Crete and used for transportation of olive oil and wine. From Seven Gate of Thebes, only two round towers of Elektrinsky Gate remained. At Pratitsky and Gomeloidisky Gate. The sites of the Mycenaean wall, which were dug out in 1915 and 1984, remained. Elektrinsky Gate, dug out by Andonios Karamopoulos in 1908 and belonged to the period of gaining the city of Cassandrum. 315 BB. Also far. Write comments. Read comments. Interesting people will tell interesting stories. All of good mood and good luck.